Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou nā manuhiri. No mai, haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings and welcome to this space made sacred over the last 115 years by Auckland Unitarians. Unitarians seeking freedom of thought, a closer connection to each other and the world we live in, and a more loving way of being. If you are a visitor or haven't read the newsletter, this is the Sunday when we hold our annual general meeting. Having endured many, it is not hard to contain my excitement. But I've had a change of heart. While you may feel electing our management committee and approving our budget don't require your presence, I have come to understand this meeting as a time to say this is my community of faith. And in faith, I will offer what I have to say and give my vote. It is a vote of confidence in our future. So I hope you will stick around after morning tea to participate. Even if you're not yet a voting member of the congregation, it is a sign of support and an affirmation to be present and to use your voice. So please join us at morning tea, our sacrament of hospitality, and consider hanging around for our annual general meeting. My opening words are by Matthew Johnson. For 5,000 years or more than 15,000 generations, human beings have been invoking spiritual power. My predecessors and yours have gathered together to make sense of their lives and their place in the cosmos. And they have spoken aloud and invited what they conceived as sacred and powerful to be with them. They called upon the spirits of air and earth, fire and water. They called for the bear and deer. They asked for the raven to protect them. They pleaded for the heroes of old to slay the monsters of their fear. They sang songs they learned from their grandparents and moved in the appointed ways or in ways that were new, but felt like the right thing to do. And they imputed power to these spirits and to the memories of those heroes. They called them gods, and they were invoked. Vishnu and Kali, Elohim, Odin, and 100 million others. Every group of people everywhere, they gathered to make sense of their lives and to make sense of their place in the cosmos. And they called these spirits to be present to them. And so do we. So do we. We gathered this morning to make sense of ourselves and this universe in which we live as best we are able. And we call ourselves to worship together, and we invoke the power and wonder of life itself, that to which all those spirits of animals and memories of heroes pointed the way. We invoke that power, which is, we know, always around, always with us, but which we sometimes forget about. We forget that we are part of the whole of creation. We forget that we are stardust. We forget that we are capable of miracles, first among them, that we can love. We forget these things. So we invoke the power of existence so that we can remember, so we can lift our eyes and open our ears to the true and beautiful. For 5,000 years or more, we have done this. In many tongues, in many ways, we have done this. And so we continue that ancient tradition in our way and in our time. on this Sunday when we hold our annual general meeting. Let us light this chalice to symbolize our future, for a brighter future for every person on earth, for a sustaining faith that carries us through even the darkest of times. This being the third Sunday of the month, when our offering goes to our peace and social justice work, we've started the tradition of having a brief update, a discussion of what some of the things that's going on. And Paul will get, and are you doing one, Kay, too?
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So it just caught me by surprise. So we are constructing a little free food pantry, which is an idea that I saw came up on Facebook. It operates like a little free library where people come and put in books and take books away. In this instance, it's people put in food and then people who need it can come and take it away. And the idea is that the wider community will contribute to it. It's not just us who are filling it, we're just providing the space for it. And so Dave has almost finished building it and had a really lovely experience this week where we decided we didn't want a glass door in case that got damaged. So he's found a source for some very strong plastic. And when the person who was providing the plastic found out what it was for, he donated that. So it's almost finished, and then Michaela's going to decorate it for us, and then it's going out the front of the church.
Yes, I'm Paul. The Tonga Dyslexia Project is going very well. It's off to a very good start, and we have 3 tutors working up there tutoring children. I leave again to go up very early on Monday morning, and I'll bring in 2 additional laptops that the church has kindly purchased, so that will enable the program to be extended to be able to tutor 6 additional students. So we do have some big plans, but I really would prefer to discuss those on the 3rd Sunday in June because they're somewhat reliant on discussions going very well on this upcoming trip all of next week. So watch this space, but we hope to be expanding in a big way in Tonga and really serving the needs of a large number of children with dyslexia.
Thank you, Paul. You'll notice something's different. I'm not up there. And part of that reason is on Tuesday while taking a shower, someone broke into my house and stole my computer and my iPad, which is why there was no story for the kids. So it's been a challenging week. Your order of service looks kind of tacky, but I did it on my iPhone, which took a good part of a day. So that threw kind of a kink in my week. Many years ago, when I was in seminary, I was trained to preach without a text. But I haven't done it in years, so I have no idea. There is no text. I have a couple of notes here for quotes that I need to give. But I know where A is, and I know where C is. How B is, I'm not quite sure. We'll get there somehow. So with that explanation, you'll notice that the title for this sermon is Bending the Arc of History. Now, when I chose that title, I thought I would build on the fact that Martin Luther King's famous quote about that. And I was paraphrasing him. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But what most people don't know is he was paraphrasing Theodore Parker. And Theodore Parker was one of our great Unitarian ministers. He eventually took pride in being a heretic, so much of a heretic that even liberal Unitarians wouldn't invite him into the pulpit. But everybody else wanted to hear him. So he gave many talks. He was part of the Transcendentalist group with Emerson and Thoreau and those. And he just kept wanting to challenge our theology, take it beyond its margins. And that was fine with the Transcendentalists. But he was famous for, at one point, saying, when he preached, he did it with a certain amount of diplomacy. And he said, I get up and I say all these heretical things, and my congregation doesn't even know it. But he once wrote, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches out little ways, but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divide it by conscience, and from what I see, I'm sure it bends towards justice. Bending history, the arc of history, is really what we're about in this congregation. But it's hard sometimes to see it, and we're not quite sure where we're bending it. It's intuitive in many respects. We follow our principles. We deal with life as it comes up. We try to figure out how we're going to respond in an appropriate way, and are we making it more just? At the time of Martin Luther King, things looked like maybe the arc of history really was getting bent towards justice. The Civil Rights Act happened, the Voting Rights Act happened. It seemed like we were actually making some headway on the area of racism. And when Obama got elected, we thought we were now at a post-racial age. Well, we quickly found out that wasn't true after 8 years of obstruction due to his race. So sometimes it's really hard to tell if you've bent it or if it's going to stay bent. Let's say there was a time in this country under Michael Savage where we really cared about everybody. We made sure they had housing. We made sure that nobody was going hungry. There was that sense that we had actually started bend history. But now, in the, how many years later, we didn't see neoliberalism coming. We didn't know how inequality would become our norm. That we've forgotten that the purpose of an economy is not to generate or justify huge fortunes. The purpose of an economy is to raise living standards. That is, to raise the standard we experience in our daily life. If that were being lived out, we wouldn't have the deep inequality we have now. So I wanted to bring all this up on our AGM Sunday because I wanted us to think about our vision and purpose and all of that. And a couple years ago, I can't remember if we did it on AGM Sunday, but we had you talk about why you come here. And the overwhelming reason was community. Our strong sense of community, which delights me. I've spent my whole life in two different worlds working to establish and build community. I believe community is the means by which we all reach our fullest human potential. So it's important. But there's a problem with it. Because if we approach community as how it serves me, you know, it's a place where I feel good, or only just I feel good, then we've lost sight. We're using community as opposed to participating and building community. So when you have a community, you have to have an overarching purpose that you are drawn to, besides just enjoying a cup of morning tea. So this day is a day where we think about that. I've told you on several occasions of our proud history, from William Jelly Cumming, who had spent the previous 6 years working in the poorest parts of London, came with a strong commitment to the poor, strong commitment to workers' rights and the union movement. He was an avowed socialist. He was an extremely learned man who built relationships with leaders around the country. Then, you know, we have our times where we had the trade unions have their Workers' Education Association downstairs, taking classes, giving them an opportunity to get a leg up through education. We had David and Yoss out in their canoe stopping submarines. We had most recently giving sanctuary to immigrants. So we do have this proud history. And when I came here, I heard lots of stories from you about our proud history. And I loved hearing them. What I didn't hear were the darker days that we had. And I have a setting on my Google to tell me when the word Unitarian shows up in the news. And this week, Monday, before I lost my computer, I got a notice of someone in Nelson had written an article for the Nelson Mail, and I went and read it. She used to be a member of this congregation, but at least 12 years ago. Her name was Rose Cambridge. I don't know if anybody remembers her. Okay. Well, she writes a regular column, and she was going through her old paperwork, and she found, much to her surprise, because she had totally forgotten, a sermon that she gave here. And I read the sermon, and it's about not one of our better moments as a congregation. It was a tough time in our life. And so I emailed her and asked for contact information. We had a lovely chat on Wednesday and Thursday. And I asked for permission to use a part of her column this morning, just to remind you that we've been in a different place than we are now, and we've bent ourselves to a much better place. This is from her sermon on that day. A friend once described me accurately, though perhaps not kindly, as a spiritual pygmy. I had enough religiosity in my childhood to last a lifetime. My poor old mom, a restless searcher, dragged me from Protestant religious pillar to post. Nice alliteration there. We've had a motley parade of ministers in this church. She then went on to list some of them, so I've omitted that. All of them seemed out of their depth here, unhappy with us and unhappy with themselves. We, in our turn, weren't very happy with them. disagreements flared into disputes, people acted badly, and people left the church hurt and angry. Those of us who stayed on wondered if we as a group were unlovable, a bunch of charmless misfits, an evil vortex in which no minister could survive. Asked to describe this church, I say it's a place for migrants and refugees, where what you believe is not as important as what you value. Many of you were born in another country. You know that kind of dislocation. Many of us who were born here also feel dislocated, though for different reasons. I believe we are drawn to this church by a longing for a place we could feel fully at home, body and soul, released from what Kenneth Tennant called solitary confinement inside our own skins. I like that. I also want, in spite of my own history and the strange recent history of this church, to believe in the ideals of Unitarianism stands for. I think we all do. Perhaps we are romantic cynics who Kenneth Tynan called metaphysical macabres. Existence depends, said Tynan, on those metaphysical macabres who will go on waiting against all rational argument for something which may one day turn up to explain the purpose of living. Where I disagree with Ro is I don't think you just sit and wait. I think you claim a vision. I did invite Ro to come visit us again to let us know how that arc has been bending and perhaps to have another go at us in the pulpit. So this Sunday, as part of our AGM, I want you to think about how we're doing our bit to bend the arc of history. In a couple weeks, I will share my vision about being a community of servant leaders. But today, I would like you to consider not just what brings you here, but how you'd like to see that arc bend. So, choose a small group and discuss it. Maybe 3 or 4. Okay. I'm curious. Anybody want to share some thoughts for your discussion? Did you just?
Yeah, I think the main thing that came out for us was sort of dealing with different views, and especially if you have those views that are perhaps at odds with what you see as the majority around you. You know, just how do you deal with that and remain part of the community?
A community of difference.
Hi, what we talked about was primarily we come to church for the community, and I think that's not something we should throw away or anything like that, because it makes us stronger when we go out. But we talked about ways of taking our values out and spreading them out, not an evangelistic way, but perhaps going more in depth into what we as consumers, I think as we were talking about, what we can, looking at how things are made and trying to take our values into how we consume things. We also talked about there being very little information around as to what products were, whether they were made at an ethical factory or food was produced in an ethical way or an organic way. So that was just basically what we were saying, is that was one way to look, to
That's
take
excellent.
our values out.
I was privileged to sit in a group with a lot of experience in the management sector. We've got the current chairman, somebody else on the board, and then of course Betsy. So yeah, we sort of had a more holistic discussion, and we talked a lot about the 7 principles and how I think all of us were attracted by those 7 principles and felt that was very much the core of the church. And then we talked further, and there was some discussion about a lot of those principles were really individual journeys. It was something that we all collectively were having our journeys on. But number 2 and number 6 is what we thought we all had as a vision for this community, and that number 6 was the hardest to achieve, but it gave us hope. I think hope was what we were talking about, and I guess, well, that was very much like Brenda was also saying, how we bring our wonderful principles. And
It's like a rose in the winter time. Hope.
yeah.
Of course you can.
No, I wanted to add that it was great to have Hamish in our group, because what many of you may not realize is that when Hamish first came, I can't remember how many years ago, but he was very much the driving force to having a congregational survey about what our vision should be, where our future should be. And I wanted to acknowledge him because as a result of that, we had a very clear vision of one of the most important things that we needed in this community was leadership through ministerial leadership, strong ministerial leadership. And we went with that, and it was so inspiring for us, and I think we're continuing to benefit from that clear vision. Now we're ready to go to the next step, so.
I know.
Our group was saying that we think that this, in terms of bending the arc of history, that this Sunday service is really the core. You know, having the minister and having that one steady meeting each week is really good. And one thing that I personally would like to see is we've got the social justice going really well, but that number 6, in terms of the world community with peace, one of the things that I found is that the crafting more, sounds funny, mystical experiences of that we can have that sense of that experience of connection and oneness, not just the talk about it. We're really good about talking about it. And what Henry said, which was quite interesting, was that it's in our church, it all depends on individual initiative. So if I want that, I've got to actually create that, you know, and I might start a thing on an evening. Kay, with her project, she's creating it. So we really depend on individual initiative for things other than this Sunday service. So it's a place that we can be free to express ourselves, but again, coming back to other, you know, individuals have to do it, because like Marjorie's totally not into Dances of Universal Peace. So she wouldn't want to come, but other people could.
Thank you all. I appreciate you having lively conversations about all of that. And like I say, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about perhaps a way that encompasses some of the things you've been talking about. For my meditation, it's a very personal one. Having my computer and iPad stolen was gut-wrenching. The sense of violation is hard to get past. But the worst part was losing something I depend on to help me be who I am, and what I hope to do was the most humbling. It reminded me that technology is only a tool or means of expression, like paint and brush for the artist. The painting is the artist's vision that she puts her heart and soul into. The painting is the soul of the artist. I pride myself on designing and leading the best service I can for this hour on Sunday morning. I never want you to leave thinking, well, that was a waste of time. But the quality of our time together each week isn't about what I do. It is about what we do and why we do it. My real hope is that worship is your paint and brush. What will you paint that is a reflection of your heart and soul, of this beloved community's heart and soul? That which is worthy of doing, create with your hands. That which is worthy of repeating, speak with a clear voice. That which is worthy of remembering, hold in your hearts. And that which is worthy of living, go and live it now.